Merci Michael, c'était super intéressant. Donc on va démarrer maintenant la deuxième présentation. Chris, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm great.
Ok, great. Pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas Chris DiBona, c'est le monsieur open source de chez Google. Je pense qu'on a un grand honneur d'avoir un monsieur comme ça chez nous aujourd'hui, parce que c'est pas n'importe qui dans cette énorme boîte. Pareil pour Michael, hein, merci aussi d'être venu. Mais Chris est venu directement des États-Unis. et voilà, donc thank you Chris. I just let you start.
Okay.
You want.
I'll try not to screw up. Thanks. Yeah. No. So forgive me for not speaking French. My 12-year-old daughter, she's very good at French. I'm not so good. So I figured this was the Android user group. So I realized recently I was preparing some speeches for this trip to Europe that I'd never really told the story of how Android got started for reals in France, or really in a lot of places. And I thought it might be interesting as part of this discussion. So this is look at how wonderful I am. You know, I look after some open source things at Google. As much as anyone does, you can blame me if we've screwed up on anything open source. And if you have something nice to say, I can tell you who really did that. I have some other things. I did some French stuff with Inria and others, and thank you for having me. There it goes. So this is some preparatory material so that you understand about Google. Whenever you use Google, of course, you're using open source. You're using Linux. You're using a vast amount of open source code throughout the stack of software there. So when it came time for us to release a cell phone operating system, of course, we used as much open source as possible. And as you know, we decided to release as much as possible as well. At Google, if you're going to be developing, you're basically to be developing on an open source desktop using open source tooling, build tools, and all the rest, and targeting whatever it is you're going to be shipping on. We used to joke that Google was like Red Hat, except for nobody ever got to see the software. In that we had a distribution that would go out to our production systems, and everyone would use it. And then as time passed, we had a distribution for our desktops at work, and then a distribution for our network, production network. And then it turned into, oh, and we need a distribution really for the switches. And I'm like, the switches. And then they're, well, you know, we're going to be doing this Android thing. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of a distribution. And well, we're also going to do Chrome OS. And I'm like, that's another distribution. And then we had Google TV, and now we have Chromecast, and then we had Google Glass. And then it turned out we have about 10 distributions now that we're shipping from the company. And if you think about it, that's completely natural, right? Well, why not, right? You know, open source is there for us to use. Why don't we use it? You know, there's no reason not to. And if you think about how companies end up using commercial software, there's always reasons not to. There's always people standing in your way. And so when we approach software development at Google, we usually try to think, okay, we're going to start with open source, and then we're going to build on it, and that's going to be good for us. How many of you have heard me tell the story about France's Orange company and their push-to-talk system? So this is a great story because it explains everything why Google uses open source in a nutshell. So Orange wanted to ship push-to-talk functionality on the phones. Push-to-talk is when you hit the button, it's like a walkie-talkie, and then you talk, and then everyone on the bus hears everything that happens around the metro. And so they really wanted to ship this because people were not sufficiently annoying on your metros. They're like, we can be as annoying as the Americans. So they spent a significant amount of money building this functionality into their towers, their carrier networks. And so it's expensive. It was like $1 billion and some dollars. I think it was euros, so it was even more money. Was it euros back then, or was it francs? I don't know. Anyway, so it was very expensive. And they're getting closer and closer to when they were going to ship their first phone. So the infrastructure was ready. They were going to ship their first phone. They had two on the docks. They had a Symbian phone and they had a Windows mobile phone. You know where this is going. So the Windows Mobile phone was going to be the first phone, and they were getting closer and closer to launch. And every fifth call was dying. It wasn't working. And they're like, well, we can't ship it like that. Let's call up Microsoft. And this isn't an anti-Microsoft story, just for the record. It's just a what happens when you don't control things story. They call up their representative and they said, hey, this isn't working. Every six is dying, you know? And what's wrong with that? Can you help us? They're like, well, yes, we've heard of this problem. They're like, yes, our engineer found this shared library. Can you give us the fixed version of this shared library? And they go, well, we can. It's in the next version of the operating system. Oh, great. Fantastique. It's French, you know. That's great. Give us the copy. And they said, well, you can have it when everyone gets the new operating system. And they're like, well, when is that? Because we're shipping in a month. 6 months. Merde. French. Well, can't you give it to us earlier? We'll take care of it. It'll be like a puppy. We'll take care of the puppy. No. You can get it when everyone gets it. Because Microsoft did this thing that is completely reasonable, by the way. They said, okay, how much money do we make because of Orange? It's 4% of Windows Mobile revenue. Oh. It's kind of not worth it for them to maintain a separate cut of the operating system, the support lines, maintain different support queues, all the things you do to have a special cut of a piece of software for a customer. Who you want to satisfy. You don't want to disappoint the French people going, you know? So they're like, well, we can't give it to you because it would cost too much to give you a copy of this code. And they're like, we'll pay the cost. We don't care. And they're like, we can't do it. Sorry. So like, it stinks. Because their Symbian phone took another month past that to get ready, and it was fine. It didn't die. But it wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to ship the phone. They were willing to take on the responsibility of maintaining the fork of that particular library. I mean, they were willing to, but they were not allowed to. So at about the same time, over at Google, we wanted user space programs to be able to access ports under 1,000. Nerds in the room were like, yeah, whatever. Easy peasy. And so we made a small change in the operating system that allowed this. And we tested it in one of our test clusters against real traffic. Seemed to be working fine. We pushed it out to the entire fleet of, it was 100,000 plus machines at the time. Actually, it was more than that, but I can't say. We didn't have to ask anyone's permission. We didn't have to pay any money. We didn't have to tell somebody how many machines we were going to be running this on, if there was memory involved, what kind of memory. Because people in commercial software charge for all kinds of things. I actually had a lawyer at another firm. She was telling her employees they had to shut off the hypervisors on their processors, so they can only run pure on the cores of the processor. And the reason was, as they were upgrading their machines, their database client access licenses were going up, because these machines now had 16 processors and not 8. And it was too expensive. And so they're literally going in there shutting off functionality so they don't have to raise the price of their software. It's completely bizarre. But at Google, we were able to push this out without asking permission, without giving up information we didn't want to give up. We were able to be ourselves. And at the same time, when we go and talk to a software vendor or a hardware vendor, there's another conversation happening with those people who don't like Google. They're saying, it's nice that you want to help Google, you want to sell Google stuff. You know that our thing's going to cost more now, right? And these conversations really happen. And in open source, they can't happen. And so we really wanted open source whenever we could get it. And when we shipped Android, we really wanted to do that too. I'm going to pass this stuff. I want to get to this because I don't have a lot of time for this part of it, and we want to go to Q&A, and that's better. But I wanted you to know this. So, circa 2005, we were asking ourselves, okay, what does the world look like in cell phones? It looks more like the horrible world of desktop operating systems in 1990, where you have one player or two players with all the market share, and in no way do they want anyone else involved. So at the time, Symbian was 80-some% of the market, RIM was 10-12% of the market, and Windows Mobile was the rest. And there was like onesie-twosie operating systems out there like Sony Ericsson and the rest, but nobody cared. These were the smartphones in 2005, 2004. And to get on these smartphones, you would have to write applications. Okay, fine, that's cool. You would have to have special versions of your website in WAP or WHTML, yeah, whatever. And you'd have to pay handset manufacturers, carriers, and all kinds of vendors just so you could stay in their web browser. And that was not tenable. We knew that, I mean, a moron knew that people would be accessing the web through their phones. Eventually, it would be cracked open so it would look more fair and more like the internet. But the way it was right there, it was looking pretty grim. And so we're like, okay, how do we reinforce this idea of having multiple competing commercial and open source operating systems for mobile, the way that having multiple open source and commercial browsers ended up working for the internet, and having multiple commercial and open source servers was working for web, for mail, for you name it. Right? I'm sure someone's still using FTP, and there's probably a commercial version available and an open source one. Right? Well, we know there's open source ones. So how do we do that for the mobile market? Well, looks like we're going to have to release an open source cell phone operating system. Luckily, at the same time, Andy Rubin, who doesn't know who Andy Rubin is? Yeah, in this group. Yeah, Andy Rubin was going around the valley saying, "Hey, me and my 5 best friends here, Sweatland and the rest, we want to go and make the last cell phone operating system. It's going to be open source. This is the last time I'm going to do a cell phone operating system." That's his pitch, you know, because he had written one at Danger, he had written one at General Magic, and he was done, you know. But he's like, "I want to do one last one, and that's it. And it's going to be open source so that people will have it for the rest of the time." And that resonated with a lot of people, and especially resonated when he came and spoke with us. And we're like, how about this? Why don't we just buy you, give you all the staff you would ever need, and ship a phone in some non-geologic amount of time? And it took about 2-3 years, and about 300 people. And that's what we did. And we did it because we really wanted a cell phone that everyone could have, everyone could use, and that for Google, for the web, people would be able to get to the websites they wanted to get to. And they would be able to see what those websites were able to give them without some unusual fee or unusual structures between you and the user, and between the user and you, if you were a web producer. So this really informed exactly how we were going to do Android. And what's interesting about it, too, we chose to go a completely extreme route when it came to licensing, right, at the time. We decided to use Apache. And the thing about Apache that people still don't realize is so wonderful about it. And you know, you're Europeans, right? You're Europeans. So you're so much smarter about software patents than Americans. So much smarter. But unfortunately, it doesn't matter, okay? Because if you look at what patents cost the software industry, what patents cost the mobile phone industry, every single one of your phones costs probably $2-3 more than it needed to, right? Because of the costs associated with patents on the bill of materials in China, on the bill of materials wherever your phone was built, and the pressure from those sorts of organizations, litigation pressure, the internal costs rises. So when we launched Android, we said, hey, you know, we're not just releasing code here. We're also releasing any patents we might have that read on this code for you and your users. All you have to do is not sue us. Okay? If you sue us, we're going to keep those patents, we're going to use them for our defense. But if you don't, we're not going to come after you on those, because we have to file patents to protect Google, because it's the only thing that saves us from these crazy lawsuits. But we want to make sure that people don't think that this is some sneak attack with our software. So anyway, so that was something that was really important when we did Android. And that's where we are today. So shipping about 1 million devices a day. Those are just the ones, by the way, that actually talk to Google. You know, these are not like the Kindle Fire or the Baidu phones and the Bing phones that are out there, or the Facebook phone. Those don't talk to Google directly, unless the users decide to install Gmail or whatever. But yeah, so we see about 1 million devices activated a day right now. And you know, we're still releasing this stuff. We just released MR3, I think, or MR2.1.3. I'm testing the MR3 now. And that code just comes out. And we just had 2 releases in the last 3 weeks. And it's still going well. Yeah, so I don't know that you care about this stuff. But I've used up my 20 minutes, I'm pretty sure, and we should go to questions. Right? Yeah? Did I use my 20 minutes? I mean, I can keep on going.
If you have a few interesting things to say more, you can.
I'm not very interesting.
Okay.
I really like questions because we can get into really cool stuff. And You
Okay,
know.
maybe Michael, you can join
Yeah,
Chris
yeah.
on the stage.
We have chairs.
We are supposed to have a few of